I've wanted to make this video for a long time. There are 20 deaths ranked here, and I want to be upfront that this is my opinion. I've spent a lot of time on the order, and I'll explain my reasoning on every single one, but if you'd move somebody up or down, I actually want to hear it, so put it in the comments. Counting bullet holes gets you nowhere with this show. Some of the most violent-looking deaths are over before the person feels anything, and some of the quietest ones are genuinely hard to sit through. A few people on this list barely bleed at all. So I'm measuring 4 things: how much it hurt, how long it took, how much they understood while it was happening, and how much dignity they had left at the end. That last one matters more than people give it credit for, because this is a world built entirely on respect, and there's a man coming up on this list who died comfortably, painlessly, with nobody in the room, and still ended up as the punchline of his own funeral. Let's get into it. Number 20, Cosette. You are probably thinking, who the fuck is Cosette right now? Let me remind you. Adriana had a small dog, annoying little thing, but very cute and innocent, did nothing to anyone.
Cosette! Come on, Mommy. Let's go for a walk.
One night, Christopher comes home high, sits down on the couch on top of the dog. The only reason she is number 20 is because she is not human, but god damn it, imagine dying, and the last thing you see is Christopher's ass slowly zooming on your face. After that happened, Adriana is destroyed by it, and Christopher spends the whole argument explaining why it wasn't really his fault. He killed the one thing in that apartment that had no complicated feelings about him, and his first instinct was to defend himself. Rest in peace, Cosette. Anyways, moving to humans now. Number 19, Tony B. Tony Soprano waits outside his uncle's farmhouse and takes his own cousin with a shotgun as he steps out of the car. That looks like one of the most violent deaths in the show, and it's actually the most merciful thing anyone does for anybody on this entire list. Phil wanted Tony B alive so he could torture him for killing his brother Billy. Everyone involved knew that. Tony gets there first specifically so his cousin never has to go through it. I've got Tony B at 19 because it's instant and because the man pulling the trigger did it out of love. Tony B spent weeks knowing this was coming and had nowhere left to run, so there's real dread in the build-up. The actual death is over before he registers it. In this world, that's about as good as it gets. Number 18, Jackie Jr. Jackie Jr. robs a card game he has no business robbing, gets a man killed, and shoots at made men. There's only one way that ends. Ralph makes the call, and Vito walks up behind him in the projects and shoots him in the back of the head. He never sees it coming, so there's no conversation, no dread, and no last few seconds of understanding. I put Jackie at 18 because on pain, duration, and awareness, he scores about as low as anyone can. What keeps him on the list at all is what surrounds it. He's a kid who got manipulated into this by grown men who knew exactly what they were doing, and Tony promised his father he'd keep him out of it, and then handed the decision to somebody else so he wouldn't have to make it himself. The murder gets written off as a drug thing in the projects, and his mother believes it, and Meadow believes it for a while too. He dies without knowing anything, including who actually decided it. Number 17, Bobby. New York gunmen find Bobby in a model train store and shoot him while he's standing there admiring the blue comet, and he falls into the display as the trains derail around him. This is one of the saddest deaths in the show, and plenty of you will want it higher than 17. Physically, it's a fast shooting, and Bobby gets very little time to understand what's happening to him, so on pain and duration and awareness, he barely registers. What makes it hurt is what's around it. That store is the one small private world Bobby built for himself. The only place in his life that had nothing to do with the crew or the violence or Janice, and they come find him there. He's holding something he was excited about, standing there unarmed in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, just a guy in a shop looking at a train. That scene hurts us much more than it hurt Bobby. Number 16, Phil. Phil has the most spectacularly ruined corpse in the entire series. Walden shoots him at a gas station, his wife jumps out of the SUV before it's in park, and the vehicle keeps rolling until a tire goes over his head, while his grandchildren are strapped in the back seat. A guy nearby delivers the immortal medical diagnosis. It's gruesome, it's humiliating, and it's extremely Sopranos. I have Phil down at 16 because he took a bullet to the head before that tire ever arrived, so he felt none of it and knew none of it. He's here entirely on the dignity criterion, and he loses more of it in 10 seconds than most people manage in a lifetime. The other thing pushing him up is that the damage lands on everyone except him. His wife watches it happen, his grandchildren are in the car when it does, and whichever funeral director got that phone call spent the rest of the week reconsidering his career. Phil spent years demanding respect from everybody around him and then died in a way nobody could describe respectfully afterward. Number 15, Richie. Richie is one argument away from moving against Tony and taking the family. Silvio has already advised having him killed, and Tony has already agreed. None of that is what gets him. He comes home, argues with Janice about his son being a ballroom dancer and what that might mean about him, and when Janice says it wouldn't matter either way, Richie punches her in the mouth and tells her to put his dinner on the table. She walks out of the room, comes back with his own gun, and shoots him in the chest, and he sits there for a second not believing it before she shoots him again. Richie lands at 15 because it's fast and he never sees it coming, and because everything after it is a complete erasure. Christopher and Furio take the body to the pork store and dismember it with the meat equipment, so there's no funeral and no body and nothing for anyone to bury. And then there's the cover story, which is the part that gets me. Tony puts out that Richie went into witness protection. This is a man whose entire identity was old school honor, who did 10 years without saying a word, who came home furious that nobody respected the rules anymore. His permanent legacy in that world is that he turned rat. He dies in a kitchen dispute, gets ground up in a butcher shop, and is remembered as an informant. For Richie specifically, that's worse than the 2 bullets. Number 14. Fat Dom. Fat Dom helps kill Vito, then drives to Jersey and starts making jokes about it at the pork store. Silvio tells him to leave. He keeps going, moving from Vito to insults aimed at Carlo, until Silvio hits him and holds him down while Carlo stabs him repeatedly. He starts as a guy telling jokes behind the counter and ends as a body that 2 panicking gangsters need to dismember before anyone walks in. I've got Fat Dom at 14 because his death is fast and almost entirely his own fault, which is the least sympathetic combination on this list. Nobody walked into that pork store planning a murder. Dom talked himself into it in real time and never saw the moment the room turned. What makes it land is the irony, since he spent that week helping reduce Vito to a message and then became another piece of meat in a shop full of it. Number 13. Mustang Sally. Sally beats Vito's brother Brian half to death with a golf club, which is what gets Tony to order the hit. Bobby Sr. comes to see him under the pretense of arranging a safe way out of town, and Sally believes it, because Bobby Sr. is an old family friend who looks like he couldn't hurt anyone. Then it turns into a struggle, and Bobby Sr. shoots him in the head. What gets Sally onto the list at 13 is how badly it goes. Bobby Sr. has lung cancer and can barely breathe, so what should have been a clean professional job becomes messy and physical, a dying man doing violence he no longer has the body for. Sally gets attacked by someone with enough experience to still be dangerous and not enough strength to keep it quick. Bobby Sr. finishes the job, gets in his car, lights a cigarette he absolutely should not be smoking, coughs so hard he loses control of the wheel and crashes. Tony sent one dying man to kill another, and both of them are gone within minutes. Nobody wins. The organization considers it handled. Number 12. Gigi. Gigi dies of a heart attack on the toilet at the crew's hangout. Physically, this is the easiest death on the list by a wide margin. He's alone, it's fast, and there's no killer in the room. So I put him at 12 purely on dignity, because he loses more of it than almost anyone in this show. Gigi spends his whole career trying to earn standing in an organization that runs on nothing but standing, and then his entire legacy becomes the position his body was found in. At the funeral, his own guys stand around discussing constipation and turkey and how they had to get him off the seat. Nobody's talking about what he did or who he was. Matthew wets himself in a concession stand, and 2 people ever know about it. Gigi's humiliation becomes the story everyone tells. In a world where reputation is the only thing that outlives you, that's a genuinely bad way to go, and no gun can do it to you. Everything below him died undignified. Everything above him felt it happening. Number 11. Min. Polly hears Min keeps money in the house and breaks in believing she's out, and she's home. She catches him in her bedroom and recognizes him immediately, and for a few seconds he tries to talk his way out of it. Then she starts screaming, and he smothers her with a pillow. Min goes in at 11 because of how close Polly has to be to do it. A gun would let him stand across the room. A pillow means holding it down over an elderly woman's face while she fights him underneath it, and suffocation takes time, so he stays close enough to feel her getting weaker. The show makes sure we know Min is abrasive and selfish and cruel to Polly's mother, and none of that has anything to do with why she dies. She dies because she caught him stealing. Her personality just gives him material for the argument he has with himself afterward. Then Polly takes the money, hands Tony a thick envelope, and repairs his standing in the crew. An old woman suffocates in her bedroom, and a few scenes later the cast shows up with no history attached to it. That might be the cleanest description of their entire business in the series. Number 10. Fabian. Tony spots him by accident while taking Meadow on a college tour. Fabian informed on mob associates years earlier and disappeared into witness protection under a new name, and Tony refuses to let the coincidence go to waste. He waits outside his office and strangles him with a wire. Garroting is a horrible way to die. Fabian stays conscious long enough to fight it, to choke, and to work out exactly who found him, and Tony is close enough the whole time to speak into his ear. Years of hiding end with the man he betrayed pulling a wire into his throat. I've got Fabian at 10 because he gets almost everything. The awareness and the duration and the physical horror, without the personal betrayal that pushes the top of this list higher. He knows what he did and he knows the rules. What makes the scene colder is the setting. Tony is supposed to be helping his daughter pick a future. He steps out of that for 20 minutes, commits a murder, cleans himself up, and goes back to her. Number 9. Lorraine. Lorraine gets a warning first, and that's what makes this one land. Phil, Billy, and Joey Peeps interrupt her mid-collection. Billy pins her partner Jason, Joey tapes her mouth shut, and Phil stages a mock execution, firing through a phone book held against her body. She survives it believing she's died. Phil tells her that next time there won't be a next time. She keeps kicking up to little Carmine anyway. The second visit has no warning. Billy and Joey get into her house while she's in the shower and kill Jason first. She comes out, hears nothing, calls for him, and then sees Billy. She runs through her own home naked with her towel gone, still calling her partner's name, and finds him by tripping over his body. Then they shoot her. Lorraine sits at 9 for me because almost none of that was necessary. They could have shot her at the bathroom door. The chase exists because Billy wanted a few extra seconds of watching her be terrified and exposed, and she spends her last minute understanding that the first visit was the mercy, and she used it up. Number 8. Matthew. Matthew and Sean try to kill Christopher because they've somehow decided that murdering Tony Soprano's nephew is a good way to impress Richie. This plan has roughly the strategic sophistication of robbing a bank and listing the manager as a reference. Sean dies in the attempt, Matthew runs, Richie won't protect him, and he ends up hiding in a concession stand where Tony and Pussy find him. He's terrified, and he clearly believes cooperating might still save him. Tony offers him a diet soda. Matthew drinks it. He explains the whole thing and puts most of the blame on Sean. Tony lets him finish. Then he tells him the soda was his last drink, and they both pull their guns, and Matthew wets himself and begs and cries for his mother while they empty into him. The shooting itself is fast, and what puts Matthew at 8 is the false calm before it. The fact that Tony sat there and let him talk and let him hope, when the decision was made before either of them walked in. Matthew has just enough time to understand that every word he said was worthless. The kid wanted recognition from powerful men, and he spends his last moment as a terrified 20-something calling for his mother while those men shoot him next to a warm diet soda. Even the last meal is a disappointment. Number 7. Ralph. Tony comes to see Ralph after his horse dies in the stable fire. Ralph denies it. The conversation moves through his son and the money and the accusation until it turns into a fight in the kitchen. This turns into a brawl, with both men grabbing whatever's in reach. Ralph sprays Tony in the face with insecticide. Tony throws him around the room, beats him, and eventually strangles him, and Ralph fights hard enough to hurt him and stays conscious for most of it. Then it gets worse. Tony calls Christopher and the two of them dismember Ralph in his own house, taking the head and hands and carrying the pieces out separately. Christopher picks up the severed head by the hairpiece, which comes off in his hand, revealing that Ralph was lying about his hair the entire time. Even after one of the most violent scenes in the series, this show finds room for that. Ralph is my 7 because that's where physical brutality tops out in this show. Ralph gets the full experience of being killed by hand, watching the person do it, feeling himself lose, staying awake through the strangling, and his body gets no dignity afterward at all. The man who treated everyone around him as disposable becomes a disposal problem before the night is over. Number 6. Big Pussy. Tony, Silvio, and Paulie take him out on the water after confirming he's been working with the FBI. Pussy knows. He knows the second they head downstairs, and he keeps talking anyway, minimizing what he gave them, telling stories, asking for a drink, because talking is the only thing delaying it. These are his closest friends, and Tony has known him most of his life, and Silvio and Paulie have eaten with him and worked with him for decades. And Pussy spends his last minutes looking from one familiar face to another, checking whether any of that history still counts for anything. It does count. That's what makes it worse. They let him drink, and they let him finish his story, and their sadness is completely real and it changes nothing, and then all three of them shoot him together and put him in the ocean with weights on. I have Pussy at 6 because that's where physical pain stops being the main measurement. Pussy's death is faster than Ralph's and far worse to sit through, because he gets a long, clear view of the exact moment he stops being a person to these men and becomes a problem that needs to sink. They mourn him before his body hits the water. Number 5. Eugene. Eugene inherits money and finally sees a way out. He wants to move his family to Florida. Tony refuses to release him, and the FBI refuses too because he's been informing for them and they still need him in place, and his wife is pushing him for a solution while his son is using, so every door closes at once. He goes down to the basement and takes his own life. The show refuses to make it look peaceful. It stays with him and strips out every comfortable idea people attach to this, and the effect is bleak in a way the shootings never are. Eugene goes in at 5 because that's where the list stops being about what somebody does to you. Eugene has time. Nobody surprises him, nobody makes the decision for him, and he walks into it fully understanding that this has become his only available form of retirement. The money that was supposed to buy his freedom just proves how completely he doesn't have any. His wife eventually gets to move. Eugene finds a way to give her what she wanted by removing himself from the equation entirely. The Mafia says membership is for life. The FBI says cooperation is for life. Both of them call it a choice. Number 4. Vito. After being exposed, Vito runs to New Hampshire and starts building something real with Jim. Then comes back to New Jersey because he can't tolerate ordinary work and still believes money might buy his way back in. That decision puts him in a motel room when Phil's men arrive. Fat Dom and Jerry knock him down and tape his mouth shut. Phil steps out of the closet to watch, and the image is so direct that explaining it feels almost insulting. The man consumed by rage about Vito being gay literally comes out of a closet to supervise. Vito can't speak. He can only look at Phil and plead through the tape while they beat him to death with pool cues, and investigators later find one of the cues inserted into his body. I've got Vito at 4 because every single stage of this is designed. The tape removes his voice, the beating extends the pain, and the cue turns his sexuality into the instrument of his humiliation after he's already dead. Phil wants Vito's family and Tony's crew, and everyone hearing the story secondhand to understand exactly why it happened. Vito knows these men. Phil is related to him by marriage. This gets framed as family honor by a man who leaves Vito's wife a widow and his children destroyed, and it keeps hurting them long after he's gone, since Vito Jr. learns the details from newspapers and gossip and starts falling apart. Phil helps cause that damage and then lectures the kid about becoming a man. The bravery on display is remarkable. Several armed men restrain one unarmed guy in a motel room while a boss watches from a safe distance, truly the warriors of their generation. Number 3. Adriana. The FBI traps her into informing. Christopher eventually learns the truth, and for a moment she believes he might choose her, that they might leave New Jersey and start over somewhere. Christopher chooses Tony. Tony calls her and says Christopher has tried to kill himself and that Silvio is coming to take her to the hospital. She gets in the car believing the man she loves might be dying. Somewhere on the drive, the route changes and Silvio turns off toward the woods. She understands. Nobody announces anything. Silvio doesn't explain a verdict. She looks out at the trees and starts crying because she's worked out that Christopher handed her over and that every promise and every beating she forgave and every year she gave him has just reached its final value. Then Silvio drags her out and she crawls, begging, and it happens off camera. Adriana lands at 3 because her suffering starts well before the car stops. The physical part is shorter than Vito's, and the psychological part runs the entire length of that drive. The episode makes it worse by briefly showing her driving away alone, free, starting over, and letting that feel real for a few seconds before taking it back. The real Adriana is still in Silvio's car. Afterward, Christopher dumps her vehicle at the airport and throws out her things, and Carmela is quietly encouraged to believe she ran off with someone. The cover story is so ordinary that people just accept it. She disappears, and everyone responsible goes back to eating and arguing and doing business. Her death destroys the idea that being close to these men protects you. She spent years around them, served them drinks, hosted them at her club, treated them like family. All of that history is exactly what Silvio used to get her into the car. Number 2. Christopher. Christopher crashes the car while driving high with Tony in the passenger seat. He survives the impact, and he's badly hurt, struggling to breathe with blood filling his airway. He tells Tony he'll never pass a drug test and asks him to call a taxi instead of an ambulance. Tony looks at the destroyed child seat in the back. Then he looks at Christopher, reaches over, and pinches his nose shut. Christopher can't breathe through his mouth because he's choking on his own blood. Tony holds his hand there and watches him die. Christopher is my number 2 because this is worse than anything an enemy could have done to him. Christopher is helpless, injured, and still believes Tony might save him. Tony spent years calling him family, grooming him as a successor, demanding loyalty. The final use he finds for all that closeness is knowing precisely when Christopher is too weak to stop him. The method matters too. No weapon. Just his hand on the face of a man he's known since the day he was born, held there while the body underneath fights it. And Christopher's whole story leads here. He gave up Adriana for Tony. He took the humiliation. He came back from rehab into a crew where staying sober made him an outsider and relapsing made him a liability. Tony spent years complaining that he was unreliable and emotional and addicted, and when the opening finally came, he converted every one of those complaints into permission. Then he goes to Vegas, sleeps with one of Christopher's old girlfriends, takes peyote in the desert, and celebrates the fact that a burden is gone. Christopher dies looking at the person he sacrificed almost everything for. The child seat gives Tony a moral excuse, and his behavior afterward shows how much resentment was already sitting there waiting for one. Number 1. Tracy. She's 20 years old, pregnant, and working at the Bing. She tries to get close to Tony, bringing him bread, asking his advice about her life, clearly looking for somebody in that building to look out for her, and he keeps his distance because she belongs to Ralph. Even Tony can hear how ugly that sentence is, and he keeps living inside the system that makes it true. Ralph treats her like property. Silvio treats her like property too, dragging her out of Ralph's house when she misses a shift and reminding her what she owes the club. Every man around her has a financial or sexual claim on her, and not one of them has any responsibility for her safety. Outside the Bing, she argues with Ralph and insults him. He hits her, knocks her down, keeps going, and beats her head against a metal guardrail until she's dead. There's no strategic reason for any of it, since she didn't inform, didn't threaten anyone, and didn't touch a made man. Ralph kills her because she embarrassed him, and he believes embarrassment is something you answer with your hands. Tracy is number one for me because it's prolonged, personal, and avoidable at every single stage. Ralph could stop when the argument starts, or after the first hit, or when she goes down, and he keeps going and she's conscious for it, feeling each stage and understanding that the father of her child is killing her outside the place where they both work. The men inside are close enough to hear something happening and far enough away to stay out of it until it's finished. Then Ralph walks back in and behaves like Tracy caused him an inconvenience. He calls her a whore and reminds Tony she wasn't related to him. By their rules, he's damaged another man's earner and left a mess outside the club. The dead woman barely factors into the conversation. Tony hits him for it, which breaks their rules, and even Tony's outrage gets tangled up in ownership and hierarchy. Within minutes, the argument is about whether Tony had the right to strike a made man. Her life disappears behind a workplace dispute between two gangsters. Vito's murder is more elaborate. Eugene's is more hopeless. Adriana's betrayal cuts deeper. Christopher dies at the hands of the man he chose over everyone. Tracy gets every form of cruelty on this list at once while having less power than any other victim in it. She's young, physically overmatched, financially trapped, and treated as disposable long before Ralph raises his hand. The show contains bloodier images than her body. Phil's head under the tire is harder to look at. Vito's motel room suggests more physical torture. Ralph's dismemberment produces more gore. Tracy's death leaves the worst impression because nothing breaks. The Bing opens the next day. Ralph keeps earning. Silvio protects his investment. Tony goes back to therapy and discusses the whole thing without ever using her name. The men around her slowly convert a human being into an uncomfortable memory, and the machine keeps running exactly the way it was built to, which might be the real rule for surviving this world. A quick bullet is luck, a planned execution is professional courtesy, and a body that still fits in a coffin is practically a happy ending. The unlucky ones die slowly enough to understand exactly what everyone around them always thought they were worth.